Welcome to Meanwhile at the Museum, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes with the people, stories, and shenanigans that make Cincinnati Museum Center what it is. I'm Cody Hefner, and I'm joined today by Gwen Elliott, our Director of Community Collaborations. She's nodding because I got it right.
Yeah, you did.
Welcome, Gwen. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Cody. Thanks, Mitch.
So, mine and your time at the Museum Center are sort of parallel.
Yeah.
I think we started pretty close together. When did you start?
So I started officially in October of 2011. So I think you have me beat by like minutes.
Like a day or two,
yeah,
maybe.
Yeah.
But we didn't do the HR orienting and onboarding together, though.
No, that's because you came in like the ticket zone and like all the K1s and all the cools. And I came in to work with Santa Claus. Like I was in and out. Like I was not supposed to stay. And here it's been 12 years.
You just hit out. And
hey guys! Yeah, so I actually during my interview, I said, what are my chances of staying? And my hiring manager at that time said, not good. They're not good. And I, fresh out of improv school, said, but what if I'm a rock star? And he said, to quote, I won't say the full words so you don't have to fully beep it. He said, you'd have to be a KA rock star. And I said, I can do that. I can do that. And so I'm apparently a kick-butt rock star, and I'm still here, and he's not. So I'm just kidding. He's amazing. He is a vice president at another museum. He's incredible.
I like that you said KA, like we would bleep what I'm assuming was kick.
No, well, right. Like, okay,
unless,
so
is there...
kick A.
Okay. I was like, did I learn a new cuss word?
Yeah.
I felt like a little kid. I was like, oh, no.
Yeah. There's small children in my life. I beep everything.
So you started to work with Santa.
Yeah.
Well, you did work with Santa. But you started here working with Santa. In what capacity? Were you an elf?
Well, we didn't really have elves yet. But so I worked Holiday Junction. Fun fact, I also mentioned this in my hiring process. I have an irrational fear of taxidermy. Like I am afraid of stuffed animals. So again, it's been a very interesting 12 years.
Stuffed live, stuffed
formally
real animals,
alive,
not like a teddy bear.
No, no. Again, small children in my life. We have teddy bears, but like we don't have any deer heads. I grew up in North Central Indiana. I can't. Like I would call ahead to my friends and be like, "You want to come over?" And I'd be like, "Does your dad kill stuff?" So
is it all taxidermy?
Oh, yeah.
Like a fish. Like a mounted fish. Like, how do you feel about big mouth Billy Bass?
Okay, so that's just ridiculous. But like, I used to babysit for a kid in high school whose parents had a giant swordfish in their living room, and I would just like, okay, watch the kid, not the fish. But I made it through. But yeah, like Ipu, they used to hide him in the walls for me when I was closing exhibits, and I would open and be, okay, cool, hey guys. But yeah. So when I came in, I said, I have a fear of taxidermy and I want to stay here forever. And they said, good luck, girl. But so we went for Santa. They said, it's fine. There's no taxidermy. They forgot about all the taxidermy over the kids riding train that we had 12 years ago. Yeah. So literally my job, because I was a punk and couldn't do half the jobs without, a full panic attack at that point, as I just did Santa's line. And so I was like a hostess for Santa. And so there's like an iPad and people would check in with me and I'd like razzle dazzle the parents. And that's what I did for 6 months. And then came Pompeii. And so I love that we have Pompeii right now because that's kind of the full circle of having it back. And I was a coordinator on the floor for Pompeii. And then the next exhibit was Dead Sea Scrolls. And that was like, at the time, I thought like, oh my gosh, this is a convening of all of my life. So I have, we can talk about this in a minute if you want, but I have a very atypical museum background. Like I fell into museums because I needed a job, and so I was going to hang out with Santa for 2 months and be done. But I have a degree in biblical studies. Actually, it's a double degree in biblical studies and communication with an emphasis in theater. And then I graduated from the Second City, Chicago, from the Improv Conservatory up there. And so at this point, we have Dead Sea Scrolls, and I get put in charge of the actors at the beginning. And I was like, acting and improv and Bible? Check. My life is complete. And then, there's been another 11 years since. So it wasn't finished. It was just...
So for every time someone's hiring or every time someone's looking at resumes, they're like, man, no one ever checks all the boxes. So we're just going to have to pick the best that we have. And actually... we have someone.
Yeah.
Who can do this?
Who can do that? Yeah. There was a long period of my life here, and I think other people have probably stepped into this position more than I have now, but there was a long joke that I was the queen of other duties as assigned, because it was just like, okay, well, this is weird. It'll probably go to Gwen. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And I just ooze enthusiasm, which sickens myself even. But like, everyone's just always like, yes, let's try something new. And that's my improv side.
I just imagine like the craps stick, which is, like the dice game.
Yeah.
When they use that little stick to push the dice to people, those are other duties as assigned. Just
Yeah.
being, shh,
Yeah.
over to Gwen.
I think like all of our job titles, or like all of our jobs, it's at least like 5% other duties is assigned. But there was a chunk in my life where it was over 25, and it was an exciting time. It was like, all right, and now you're going to do this. And we had this pop up. Hey, do you want to take care of musicians in the rotunda for 5th grade choirs? Heck yeah, I do. Do you want to turn on the organ every morning? Why not? Like,
is this all just your improv training? Someone asked you, hey, how about these job duties? And you just kept saying yes and?
Yeah. There was a lot of that. My current boss, who's incredible, and I adore her, and we've worked together.
Name drop them.
Is Claire.
Claire's great.
Claire's the best. We've worked together. She's been my direct boss for 7 years now, 8 years. She is my gatekeeper now at this point, where she's just like, stop saying yes to everything. Just stop. Like, you're enough.
She's saving you from yourself.
Oh yeah, which is more than fair. But yeah.
All right, so we have to. This has been a real hot start, so we got to start unpacking some stuff.
Okay, unpack some
a little
stuff.
bit, and I'm trying to think of where the logical place to start is. So I'm just gonna jump in to biblical studies.
Yeah.
You went to college and you said, "This is it for me. This is what I wanna get into. Biblical studies and communications." Why? What's the background there?
Okay, so I went to Cincinnati Christian University. Rest in peace. Loved that place. And I didn't go wanting to do biblical studies, but everything that you do is biblical studies. It was a double degree. And I did go into taking that. I'm a history nerd and formerly a daughter of a preacher, now the daughter of a missionary. So my dad is no longer a preacher. My parents are divorced. My mom now lives in Italy. So life has been a weird place. Right? And this is another thing. Like, when people do other duties as signs, it's like just how I've always lived. But so, yeah, so I went to CCU. Actually, I wanted to be a middle school history teacher because I thought, dude, all of my favorite, like, I love history, first of all, because it's just fun and it's very story, right? Like, I love stories. That's where I get into theater. And all of my greatest memories in history classes were, like, middle school teachers playing Jeopardy and, like, having us research the lyrics to We Didn't Start the Fire, right? Like, really fun, engaging stuff, which, that sounds like a museum. And so little did I know. But so I started that way, and then I went into these education classes, and I just remember the professors telling us, you have to have hands-on learning, like all this stuff. And they were telling us in lectures. And within a semester, I quit. I was like, the hypocrisy, like, I can't. And I called my mom, and I said, hey, Mom, and, like, I'd grown up doing comedy. I'd grown up making people laugh. And my mom had always said, like, there's no future in that. Just stop. Like, you're not that funny. And that was, like, my mom. Her very loving way all the time was, you're not that funny. And people would be laughing. I'm like, well, I think they think so. She's like, no, move on. So I called her, and I was like, hey, Mom, I'm changing my major. And she was like, to what? And I was like, so remember that comedy thing? I'm gonna go. And so I started taking classes at NKU, and that's how I got my theater emphasis. And so I finished at CCU and did that, and I called her and I was like, so I'm doing it this way. I'm gonna do theater and comedy. And she was like, oh my gosh, it's about time. And I was like, what? And she was like, well, I mean, I knew you were gonna get there.
She was just negging you through your childhood?
Yeah. That's the kind of people I've grown up with. Very lovingly supportive, opposite talking. I mean, it's cool. Apparently she knew me. Tell me I can't do something. I'm like, all right, let's go. And now I am no longer really a comic, but working here is pretty comedic every day. Like, you never know what's going to be thrown your way, and that's just kind of life. And so it's been really, really cool. And I got that degree, and then I ran an English tea room for a couple years. And then I always, like, when I come to like a crossroads, whether it's school, like the ending of school, or a career or something, kind of what did I love about it and what did I miss? And in college, I had been a college librarian, which if anyone's been listening to the last 5 minutes, you've already picked up I'm not quiet. So
My college librarian said I could not get my diploma until I paid my late fees.
Mine said the same. But so they like would shush me. But it was my college job and it was amazing and I loved it. And even though I'm loud and crazy, I really love order. So it's like this weird mashup and it was really fun. And so I did that. And then I ran an English tea room. And then at the end of that, I almost bought the tea room and I walked away and I was like, I really love explaining things to people. I really love this, but I really miss working with kids. So then I became a building sub and I worked in an elementary K through 6 for a year. And that was incredible. And it was the same thing. Like, I really love kids, but school is just like not from like the classroom setting. And so that's when I moved to Chicago and did comedy and was a live-in nanny for 3 boys. I was in charge of the 4-year-old. And my boss hired another woman. She was actually hired before I was. She was 50 years old from Sri Lanka who was in charge of the twin 2-year-olds. So the 5 of us went everywhere together. I was also the house manager and I lived in the mansion with them. And it was really a big trip going from working in Mount Healthy in a K through 6 school to working and living in a city mansion in Chicago. And so there's a lot of growth opportunities in these different things.
This is me racking my brain to be like, Oprah doesn't have kids, so it can't be her, right?
It wasn't Oprah.
But who else could it possibly be in Chicago?
It was one of the highest ranking residential realtors in the city of Chicago.
Like face on bench ads, all that good stuff.
Oh yeah, like they're still to this day very high ranking in the realtor world, and yeah, so I did that for a year, and I finished up at Second City, and then again it was like, okay, what do I do now? And the only appropriate choice was to jump in a car and drive cross country. So I took a month and I drove to Chicago to Cincinnati by way of Spokane, Washington, LA, Colorado Springs, and I took a different member of my family for each leg of the trip, like flew them in and stuff. And then we like drove. In
that route, you're telling me you did not take any geography classes in college?
No, I went from Chicago to Spokane, down to LA on the 101, over to Vegas and the Grand Canyon, Four Corners, up to Colorado Springs, and then the last like 2 days of that month were like the worst drives ever because it was just the flatlands back and it was like, oh, everything's cool. And then I came back to Cincinnati and was like, hey, all my friends, I love you. Okay, I don't have a job here. What should I do? I don't know. And like this whole time it was like this, like, what should I do next in my life? Like there should be. And I came back and I was like, womp womp. I don't know. So I went back home like every good millennial and I crashed on my mom's couch for a while. And I was there for maybe a week or two. And my mom's an interpreter for the deaf and hard of hearing. Well, that's what she did in America. And there was another interpreter in the school system who fell and like crushed her arm. So mom was like, I've got to go take care of these 2 girls who are actually deaf. And at that time, my mom was interpreting for a hard of hearing, visually impaired kid with some what we would now say developmental disabilities. So they were like, who's going to interpret for him? My mom's like, well, my daughter's crashing on the couch. And so thankfully she'd been interpreting for this kid for like 3 years. And so he was like my little brother. And I, kind of knew him at this point. And because not all the time, but often interpreters and the kids they interpret it for, like they, bond really well. So anyway, so I went and I interpreted for him for a semester. It was supposed to be just a few weeks and this lady's arm was really slow to heal. So I ended up hanging out 10 years after I graduated back in my own high school, working with this kid with multiple needs and just being able to, like make his pictures bigger or tell him you're actually allowed to have friends at lunch. And rightfully so. Like, the lunch room is a sensory overloading place, but to be able to say to him, like, hey, that kid was nice to you in science class. Should we invite him to have lunch with us? And so by the end of the year, we had like 5 or 6 kids that would come in the teacher room and eat with us. And it was a really fun year. And then, the fun semester. And then, a few years later, Mom ended up moving to Italy. And so that was cool to have that time with her. And so around that time is when I started coming back to Cincinnati. And so I always kind of joke, like, I moved from my mom's house to my best friend's mom's house and crashed at her house down here while we were trying to, figure out, like, and at that point I was just like hustling. Like, I had a friend who had like a pop-up shop at the Midpoint Music Festival when we used to have that, and I like dressed in steampunk as like selling lollipops out of the back of their van, like super weird stuff that I was just like, all right, this is
like
this
trippy lollipops.
No, they were they were
like,
real. Like, so these friends were jewelers, and so they were trying to sell like candy rings and candy necklaces to get people to see like their real jewelry. Like, it was whatever.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it was really fun, but it was just like a weekend, right? And it
They're
was
like,
kinda
what? Ring pops are they don't have the full market covered.
No, right, exactly.
Like, you need other pieces to accompany.
Yeah,
it,
right. So you can get your candy necklace, but then get some emerald earrings or whatever.
I was gonna say, do they make candy earrings?
I don't know. I
That's
think it needs to actually probably not happen, but it feels like it needs to happen, like a Pretty Princess Gwendolyn set or something like that.
It's hard to eat earrings though, but
but yeah, so, and then somebody sent me this like, hey, the museum is hiring for the holidays. And I was like, well, I've never been in that museum because I'm sure it's full of dead animals. And also, again, at the time, this all plays into what I do now, I thought that the museum, I loved museums growing up. And again, I love history and stuff, but I thought this museum in particular wasn't for me because it was going to cost too much. And like, I was just a poor college kid. And so I had only been in here one night and I'd ever been in. And it was because, like, again, in college, we'd, been out and helped some like homeless guy or something. We were helping something, and we were driving back to the university, which, if any listeners don't know, it's right behind Union Terminal up in Price Hill. And so we were driving through, and I was like, I gotta go to the bathroom. So my friends like stop at this giant, what the heck is this place? And I walk in, and I'm just like, it's like 10:30 at night. I walk into the rotunda. All of a sudden, it's just, I'm in this gorgeous place. There's no one around. I'm like, where is this like gorgeous, terrifying epicenter that I just walk into? And I use the bathroom and I run out. And that's the only experience I ever had with here, from 2001 until 10 years later when I applied.
I love that there are multiple stories of people's first experience with Union Terminal being the bathroom. So
Those are some critical bathrooms we have here.
Mitch, mark that down because we might need to incorporate that into our marketing messages.
Hey,
come for the bathroom, stay for the exhibits.
Yeah, right?
Stay for the museum.
Yeah, well, yeah. It was funny. I was hearing Bob talk about it, and I was like, yeah, dude. Yeah. I didn't have quite as, like, I don't remember the actual bathroom experience that apparently was profound for him. But I was just like, what is this magical place? And I got back in the car, and like my friends are all waiting for me, and I was like, what is that place? And they're like, oh, that's a museum. I'm like, okay. And I was like, but like, do we ever go there? And they're like, I don't know. I think they have like some free Friday something. I don't know. And we just like, and I was like, oh my gosh, that was really cool. And nothing. And now I know it is really cool. It's my favorite place in the city.
And so that your first time before you worked here was to go to the bathroom.
And then like the week I got a call like, hey, we'd like to interview you. And I kind of went into panic mode. And so I called one of my friends who had a 4-year-old at the time. And I was like, dude, what am I going to do? And so the 4-year-old gave me a tour and told me where to look. He was like, oh, there's a bear over there. And I was like, sweet. So I was like, if I go on a tour, I know like, boop, boop, I can do this. Avoid all the taxidermy.
But you're fine with live animals?
Oh, I love live animals. Yeah.
What's the disconnect? What's the difference?
Well,
is it
now
like
we're
a
going
pet
into
cemetery
a therapy
situation?
Session. I literally have no idea. It's like one of those things that I've thought back to, like I've talked to my parents about. My mom's like, at least from the age of like 2 or 3, like you would. But I am. After a decade, I am desensitized enough that I can walk by Ipu and I can walk by Barry White and like all the others. But I won't choose to, but I can, and I do.
But there was a period where, so when Union Terminal was going through its restoration,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
pretty much everyone's offices were moved out of the building, you were part of a group that was moved to our collections facility.
That is very true. Uh-huh.
Which is chock full
Yeah.
of specimens, including animals.
Yeah, that's true.
Furry, previously alive
Yeah,
animals.
it's true. In fact, when you first walked into Geyer, up until me moving in, this is what, I mean, like, literally, I've said this, and I will say this till the end of time, like, the people we work with are incredible and sometimes too accommodating, because they moved Gilbert. So if you don't know, Gilbert is our lion, named after when we lived at Gilbert Avenue, and used to, when you walked into the entrance, Gilbert would greet you. And I would just, like, wear a hat, and I'd wear a wide brim hat, and I would walk down, and I would scurry up the stairs. And when we moved over, Gilbert was gone, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can, like, walk in here. And Jane McKnight was like, Gwen, you have to live here. Like, you can't have panic attacks every day. And so it was, at that point, I don't think Heather was, I think it was still Norm. Like, I just never go into zoology, but I happily take interns into zoology and leave them at the door, and I'm like, I'll pick you up later. But yeah, it's.
Does it matter if the animal is scarier? So would a bunny and a lion are equally scary?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're equal. Yeah.
I just want to get a full picture.
No, I appreciate that.
See, I'm terrified of snakes, and Ann Wegman used to walk around with a Tupperware container, and I knew there was a snake in there.
Yeah.
And you'd be like, no way. Now, the way the offices are designed now, there's a lot more exit points or different ways to get out of certain hallways. But in the olden days, it was a lot of, if you're in this long, thin hallway, you're walking face to face with this.
Yeah, you're just going to
snake in a
turn
box.
and, like, hug the wall for a second. Yeah, no, I get it. Well, and that's the thing. Like, clearly there's been a lot of desensitization. Like, you can see me cringing even right now. I can go into Nature's Trading Post. I couldn't pre-restoration. I went in one time and I was like, oh gosh, and I ran away and ran out. But I can do it now. We have birds in Children's Museum.
Oh, this is a good question. What about like a snake skin? It's not technically a stuffed animal, but it is.
I can handle it now. When I was young, I couldn't.
What about I'm just weird. What about this scenario? What about this scenario?
Okay.
Is this helpful? Is this productive for you?
If it's productive for you, Cody, it's fine.
What about like the Ankylosaurus in Children's Museum?
Fine. He's
Fine?
fake. Yeah, he's fake.
Okay.
Like,
but
I know.
But the fossils and the dinosaurs, those are okay though?
Okay.
Because they don't have flesh on them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. This is
to that point,
very complicated.
What do you think about this talk that they're going to I can see Mitch
I know,
in my
I was gonna say,
periphery
that's
shaking
what I
his
just
head.
looked over.
But
Okay.
so loophole.
Okay, loophole.
There are these reports that they're going to clone woolly mammoths. So technically, that would be a walking, living, breathing, dead animal. But since it's moving,
it'd be
and
fine.
cognizant, it'd be okay.
So one of the best things that I've come to terms with is this idea of using death as decoration, which is what I think freaks me out.
That's such a good way to phrase it.
I think that's the thing. And I also think that's why I can handle the museum setting more. Like, still, if I would go into someone's house and they were like, check out our elk, I'd be like, oh gosh. But, like, if I'm here and I'm friends with Heather and so many, like, Dave might. Okay,
you love Dave Might, but you don't respect his work at all.
I love Dave Might. And here's the crazy thing. This is the part where I was like, maybe I shouldn't admit this in real life. There's members of my family who do taxidermy. I don't talk to them. But Dave Might is like one of my favorite people in the world. And I like, we're friends on social and I just like go through with one, like, he's incredibly talented. Oh gosh, please never invite me to your house. But like at the museum, we don't use death as decoration, right? We use death to tell stories, and it's not even using death. Like, we are using these specimens to do stuff. And so there is, again, like a different switch there and a thing that I've been able to grow into and understand it. But if I have my way, I don't go through the Edge exhibit. I will take guests through the Edge exhibit, take community partners through there. But just like young Eli when he was 4, I have taught myself where to look and where not to look. And I just, nope. Be a grown-up today, Gwen, and let's go. So this is what you thought this conversation was going to be about today, didn't you?
I had hoped. I really hoped. So let's I do want to dive more into your background because it's very fascinating. But let's spin it forward real quick.
Yeah.
Community collaborations, what's that
Yep.
mean? What do you do from a day-to-day perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. I improv a lot. It's great. No, so community collaborations, as it is now, I oversee our theme days. I oversee our community festivals and events. So if somebody calls us up and says, hey, the museum should come to the Pancake Festival, I would say, how does that tie in with our mission?
When,
And I
when
would
is
look,
that? And can you get me tickets?
I was like, for a bottle of pure maple syrup, we're in. But like, so if somebody said something like that, or we work really closely with the West End community, so I often joke that they're a Disney Fast Pass. Like if they say, "Can you come?" I say yes, and then I find out what it is. But like for others, there's a little bit of can we, should we, do we have volunteers or interns who can go? Then I also oversee our theme days, which are our big celebratory days, like Celebrate Black Empowerment Day, 1940s Day, Upstander that we partner with HHC with in the summer. And then we generally have at least one other day. This year will be around our new exhibit that's opening in natural history later this summer. So all kinds of cool things and all kinds of amazing community partners that just get to, I always say, I have the platform and I can build it for you, but you get to tell your stories at this day. And I love it because I have learned so many incredible stories, and golly, I love Cincinnati. It is not the place where I was born, but it is the place in my heart. And so roads have always led me back to Cincinnati. And so there's just so many amazing stories here, and there's so many untold stories, right? So I'm constantly looking like, who's a partner we haven't used in the past, or what's a story that we've recently uncovered? Come and share that. And we allow them to share in a variety of their ways. Like if they want to just have partner booths, if they want to have a talk or hands-on demonstration, if they want to give away library books, or, like all kinds of cool things like that. So those are the theme days. And then during COVID, I was voluntold to become the director of adult volunteers. So,
and that was coming from what area? So you have a real, like, you remember Family Circus, that comic that was always in the newspaper, and it got so much play, and I'm like, this is not fun or entertaining, but it always had like the little dashed lines of the kid walking around. That's your path. That's within my path. Cincinnati Museum Center.
That is very accurate.
You started with Santa.
I started with Santa.
Went to Pompeii.
I went into featured exhibits. I spent 3 or 4 years in featured exhibits. Then I went into more of a public programs. So yeah, I was just a floor specialist, a coordinator of visitation enhancement, which is probably one of the craziest titles I have, assistant manager of special programs, manager of special programs, and that's when I kind of stepped into, that was like true other duties as assigned. That was play the organ, that was holiday harmonies, that was the transitional period into theme days, what would become theme days. That was starting our 21 and over Serious Curiosity. And then we went into restoration, and I became the director of community festivals and events. All kinds of stuff. I mean, that was like our heyday, right? We were in the community all the time. So I remember just being like, hey, Gwen, so the Children's Museum is going to kind of close. We didn't want it to. And I was like, sweet, make some calls. And like the next week we're like having like toddler tot day at IKEA, and we're going to the Blue Manatee, and like all this, how can we engage? And I loved those years because it was, and actually I was at the Hispanic Chamber for lunch today, and they were saying like, I remember when I first met you, you were a museum without a museum. And I was like, yes, like what does it mean to be a museum without a building? And what does it mean to listen? And we just spent those years working in cupcake shops and coffee shops and just like learning from the community. And then after restoration, that's when I became director of community collaborations. And it was all of these stories we had heard and all of these, thank you for inviting us into your neighborhood, and turning it back and saying, now come back and play with us. And let's do it in really equitable ways. And so my job now, my favorite part of my job, the largest chunk, is accessibility. So I oversee accessibility at the museum, and that for me is always like see through 4 buckets. Economic accessibility, which is like our Museums for All program and other things like that.
Which is, explain Museums for All for people who may not be aware.
So Museums for All is our economic equity program that is one part a national program, and then one part what we do. And so anybody who has SNAP or Medicaid can come to the museum and pay $2 a person, up to 10 people in their group, and they get free parking. And so for us, we do SNAP and Medicaid. Nationally, it's SNAP. We're working to expand it nationally as well. And all these different ways of just engaging with people who, like me when I was in college, thought, I can't afford to come here. I'm just like a dumb little college kid. Now I know, like, I totally could have. But, I've, in the last 12 years, one of the things we haven't talked about is that, so I started in October. In March of the next year, March 2012, I was in the break room in Pompeii, and I got a phone call. And by the end of that phone call, I was a parent of a 4-year-old. So, that was really crazy. I mean, it was supposed to last for summer, and he just turned 16, and he hasn't left yet. It's been 12 years. Almost. It'll be 12 years at the end of April that we signed papers. That's incredible. But so, single parenting through that really opened my eyes to, all kinds of different things, foster care. My son has disabilities, so working with the disability community. And then, again, growing up, the daughter of an interpreter and having an aunt who is blind. And my dad not only was a minister, but then worked in behavioral health after that. All these just different facets. I remember Whitney saying, Gwen, you're going to be in charge of accessibility. And I was like, what? Why? And she just pointed I was like, oh yeah, cool, awesome. She's like, you just live this. And I was like, cool. So yeah, Museums for All really allows for that economic piece. And we've worked with the public library. As people may or may not know, you can check out Museum Center passes at the library. There's all kinds of different things that we're always trying to do to say, we literally mean it when we say the museum is for all people. And I told the lady at lunch today, I'm like, my job is to be a heat-seeking missile to find out barriers. Why do you think you can't be here? And then we have a conversation about it. Do you think you can't be here because you just don't know that you can? Or is there an actual issue? And if that's the case, tell me the issue, and then I can tell you, and I can work with my team on how we can fix that issue, or we can adapt around that issue, because we at our core believe that this is for you. There's so many ideas in the world of what a museum is and who museums are for. And at the end of the day, it's for all of us, and it is about all of us. And so that's the economic piece. Then obviously there's the disability piece of accessibility, and that's been incredible, and all of the awesome stuff we've been able to do in the last few years with our quiet zones, with our fidgets and headphones at every ticketing booth. Funny enough, our OmniMax, which you would think is the least accessible, is probably the most accessible space in the building.
The OmniMax theater that we bill as this immersive experience that surrounds you, that Dave Dzinski loves pointing out how incredible the sound system is. We start with the light tunnel. Mm-hmm. So it can be very overwhelming. So how do you...
It's incredibly overwhelming. So we have accessible seating for people who... not just wheelchair users or people with mobility concerns, which obviously are welcome to use those, but people who have motion sickness. I always say sit at the top. Or other things. Sitting at the top is point blank. Do you want it to look more like an IMAX instead of an OmniMax? Sit at the top. If you want that immersive, go right in the middle. But for a lot of the audiences I work with, up at the top. And then we have weighted blankets. So while people are watching it, they can just feel secure in where they are. We have 10 pairs of headphones just in the OmniMax. We have fidgets. We have caption readers, volume enhancers. We have visual descriptions for our blind, visually impaired audience. When they come, then everything on the screen can be descripted to them. So it is overwhelming, and yet, again, that is a barrier, right? People want to see it, but they felt like they couldn't. And so we had some really awesome conversations with community partners and with parents, and I am a firm believer, nothing for us without us. So we're constantly talking with partners. We're constantly first-person experience. And a few years ago, I had a whole group of people with sensory. They were kids. They all had sensory sensitivities, and I, put my mouth anywhere my mouth is. I go up there and I say, when you see the light tunnel, close your eyes. Just close your eyes. Just wait a few seconds. It'll be over, and then go. after the movie, how was it? All the kids, oh my gosh, it was amazing. We had so much fun. A mom goes, ugh. And I was like, did you close your eyes? And she's like, no. And I was like, it was for you too, man. Let me
Right.
go get you a ginger ale. Like, what the heck? But yeah, so I mean, it is funny because sometimes you think like they can't possibly make that. But we try. We definitely try.
What's really neat about that is sometimes you think of accessibility, or you think of the OmniMax Theater and how much of a sensory overload that can be, that the effort is not to help people avoid that. How can we, walking through the museum, well, this area is very loud. This one is, has a lot of lights and different simulations, things like that. It's not about how do you navigate around those things. How do you make those things accessible? How do you still invite people into those experiences? Because we don't want the OmniMax Theater to be just for some people. So finding a way to make that accessible to people is really amazing. And the fact that you've been able to help rise to and meet that challenge is so incredible.
Moving into this role again, when I was like, all right, Whitney, you're sure? Like, I remember telling her, like, I'm not going to be about one thing. Like, I drink out of fire hydrants, like if we're doing this, we're going to be like working with blind, visually impaired. We're going to be working with deaf, hard of hearing. We're going to be working with people with mobility challenges and limbic challenges. And we're going to be working with developmental disabilities and sensory. She was like, correct. And so, I mean, I think whenever I do this work, the word that always rings in my head, equity being my very favorite word in the world, but the second one is empowerment, right? I want to give people choice. And I think a lot of times, especially with disability groups, they are limited. They are told you can go to this special event that's just for you, but we can only take 50 or it'll get too loud, right? Or you can go to this, but you need to provide your own stuff. And there's so many incredible museums and nonprofits in the world and in our city, but I have a very different approach than a lot of different people. And my approach is and again, it's from being a mother of a child with disabilities where we have been at other places and he's gone into a meltdown. And then it's like, okay, well, I have to go all the way back to the front and get a backpack, or I have to go and like feel embarrassed because I didn't pack what I thought this was going to be a fun trip and now it's not a fun trip. Or most of his stuff happened before we got his disabilities diagnosed. But living that made me like, okay, what can I control? I can control here. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to have stuff everywhere. So if somebody is having a moment, then we can engage with their caregiver and we can say, hey, we've got some fidgets and we got a headphone and do you need a weighted blanket? And we can bring it to them and they don't have to move. They don't have to feel embarrassed. They don't have to be shuttered into a room because, one of the things that we do here in the museum is we serve the community and we show the community. And another thing here is that we don't focus just on kids. Autism, for example, is not something that you grow out of. It's your brain chemistry, and that's awesome. And neurodivergence is something that we celebrate a lot at the museum and in my own house. And so I want to make sure that things are supportive for a 40-year-old man who might get overwhelmed in the rotunda. Okay, well, what do I have? Well, right there in public safety, I have headphones. So you can go to headphones, or you can leave line if you have someone, and you can just wait in there and someone in the line with you will take care of you. Like how can we just make this more equitable and empowering so you have the choice of when you come? And that's like Museums for All. We no longer have like the free Fridays. We have you come when it works for your schedule, just like anyone else. And that I think is what I am most proud of with my accessibility work is allowing people the dignity to be people. And so yeah, and then I guess the third bucket we didn't talk about was cultural. Same thing, like how do I work with different ethnic groups, different racial groups, LGBT groups, religious groups, again, like subsets of people who may not traditionally see themselves here. How do we empower those voices? And then the fourth one, my constant white whale, is language. And so we're working on it. There's some really cool stuff coming down the line around language.
Everything you talked about with accessibility is improvising. It's figuring it out.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's one small way that your improv background has helped. But where else have you seen that kind of get you where you are and just help out from a professional perspective?
Oh my gosh, improv literally comes into my life every day. Like you kind of joked earlier about yes and, but that is a core tenet of improv, and that's a core tenet of community work, right? I have to listen well. I have to hear what they're saying. I have to acknowledge what they're saying, and I have to build upon it. I mean, that's key to community work, but that's also key to just being a director, just being a human. And so, like, if I can engage, like you and I will talk in the hallway or something, and I'll be like, hey, can you do that? And you're like, yeah. And I'm like, and then I can, like, it's just a constant flow of how another part in that, and it's very similar, but another thing that you say a lot in improv is giving gifts. And so I don't want to leave someone with something that they don't want, right? Like, I don't want to set somebody up for failure. There's this really awesome idea in a lot of African cultures that, like, I win if you win, like this idea of, like, we rise together, right? And so if I give gifts to people, whether they're verbal gifts or set them up in the museum and accessibility world or community partners to feel like their voice matters here, if I give that gift, then they're going to give their whole self. And then we are going to do better because they brought their whole self. And then that's going to encourage someone else to bring their whole self. And so if we can just be, not Pollyanna about it, because, I have said in the past that there are people out there who are much nicer than I am, just like I'm human. But I'm going to try to always listen with, okay, cool. This is a great idea. And let's do this. And not in a way to be like, your idea was cool and let me do something completely different. But, like, how can we build on it and give you a gift? Whether it's the gift of dignity, the gift of listening, the gift of giving you your due credit, right? How many times are we in meetings and somebody, and not here, we would never do that at the museum, but no. But when you're in a meeting in the business world or whatever, and somebody takes credit for your idea, right? Like, just being able to give the gift of, yeah, that is a really cool idea. Thanks, Claire, or thanks, Cordell. Those are my team. Is I think profound, and to also know. Part of improv is, and I'm clearly bad at this because I talk a lot and I talk fast, but part of improv is giving other people space. Like, if I were to do a show or a sketch and it became a one-man show, it wouldn't be that funny. But if I stand back and I let somebody else shine and then we engage, then all of a sudden it's fun. And I used to have an improv instructor who was like the Bobby Knight of improv. Like, he was intense. He would, like, throw chairs. It was, like, so intense. And one time I just remember it was like a level 3, which is like halfway up the conservatory graduation thing. But anyway, I just remember him stopping and saying, like, improv isn't there because it's funny. Like, the worst thing they ever said was 50 years of comedy. No, it's life. Because the funny is because it's life. And I was just like, this dude is like, ooh. But in his own, like, intensity, what he was saying there, and I can get that now, is that, like, funny things happen in life all around us. And that, it's like, when you're the truest, that's when you're the funniest. And so I also think, like, when you're the truest, that's when you're the most impactful. And then beyond the museum, parenthood is improv every freaking day. How to keep them alive, how to keep yourself alive while keeping them alive, oh my gosh, this week, and I'm sure this will play later, but this week is time change, and the improv that's happening at our house right now just to keep everyone stable.
Let's just screw with body systems and see what happens.
Yeah, it's so fun.
Talk to me about improv, Gwen. What was that experience like? Like, did you kind of have, like, a fallback character that you were like, just give me an opportunity to pull this one out in this scene?
I've always been a character actor, so I really love backstories, but I'm also like,
it's like, you're going to be, hey, we just need someone who's a sailor in this one. You're like, great.
Like,
well,
done. But I'm always, like, a little kooky, right? Like, it's always like, I'm a sailor who has seen some stuff.
Who's seen some stuff, who was, whose dad was eaten by a whale and now just lives life on the seas.
Yeah, like, everyone else is just like, oh, there's a sailor.
That's Moby Dick,
and
right?
then,
God, that wasn't creative at all. Mitch, cut it. Let's do something more creative.
Now in my mind, like, exactly, like, I'm a sailor who's actually been at sea for 43 years, which is weird because I'm only 42 years old. Like, it's just, like, weird stuff. I'm not actually 42. Okay. That would be way too old for me by 2 years. Anyway, whatever. But yeah, I would always have some kind of, like, weird backstory that would, why was my character acting like this? Because I grew up in actual theater and just as a naturally funny person, that's what took me into improv instead of like starting in improv, like, give me a word. You know, like I'm not as, I started gamey, but that's not where the bread and butter of Second City is. It's more sketch. And so I would always, you know, like, but I was the one who, it was, oh my gosh, I hate talking about it because it sounds like I'm being like really braggy, but like I was the one people would write sketches for. So sometimes it would be like I remember it was a show I was in that in one sketch I was like dancing to a Frank Sinatra song, and then the next sketch I was a cave woman, and then it broke up and I was a flight attendant, and then I was like a I was like Miss America pageant, but all my Miss America sash said was glasses. Like it was just like really like everybody else had really cool things like glasses. Yep, that's what I got going for me. Also, I wear glasses, if you don't really know me in real life. But, yeah. So it was just, like, all over the place.
Put glasses on.
Yeah, yeah. Like, I don't need them. But, yeah. I mean, we did stuff about the L, like the Red Line. We had a whole song about the Red Line in Chicago. So if you guys are familiar with the L. One of my favorite sketches, and I just happened to be in it, but an improv friend wrote it, was all about... sun chips and how they're the loudest bags in the world. Like when you try to open them, they're so loud. And so we would do like a series of sketches where you were like really quiet places and someone's just opening a bag. Like you're at a funeral and someone opens up a bag of sun chips, or there's like somebody at the park getting engaged and someone just opens a bag of sun chips. Like it was just like silly, you know, improv-y stuff. It was super fun.
Did you grow up like watching Saturday Night Live and stuff like that, and be like someday?
Yeah, well, so so like I said, I was a preacher's kid. My dad was actually a youth minister when I was really little. So I grew up entertaining teenagers before I was like 3 or 4. And it would just be like always putting on a show for people, always, you know, like song and dancing it, standing up, being really silly. And then as I got older, that, you know, continued. I was voted class clown. I was so proud of that. I knew that I was up for most likely to be on SNL, and I was like, oh, hopefully I have that one in the bag. But I got class clown and like legit got excited.
You're like, man, all these days of wearing the rainbow wig and the makeup paid off.
So actually, in high school, my high school job was I worked at McDonald's, but I didn't just work at McDonald's. No, actually, it's Hamburglar.
Sorry, kids. Anyone listening? There's only one Ronald McDonald. We did not ruin the.
It's true.
The lore.
It is. Oh, the stories I could tell off. But I was Hamburglar. I was a North Central Hamburglar for 2.5 years.
Can you? Come on, give us the line.
Just rubble. Yeah, you just rubble at everyone. It was the best job of my life. Like this, I love my job, but like stealing hamburgers from children at a Christmas party and then having a child go to Santa like, don't be mad at Hamburglar. Please give him presents. He doesn't mean to. It's not his fault. He's just a burglar. And I'd be like, rubble. And I'd run off with their Happy Meals. It was amazing. It was so fun. And it was like during the Beanie Baby phase. So like people would like buy all these Happy Meals and then we would donate the food to the rescue mission. So I would go as Hamburglar and hand out food. It was so cool. Like, and I was a birthday party hostess at McDonald's, and I was our high school mascot. So like these kind of things just was Coco the Wildcat.
What?
These kind of things just kind of followed me, and super fun. Then I started an improv group at Cincinnati Christian University and ran that for a few years before transitioning out.
I didn't hear anything you just said because I'm realizing that Carmen Sandiego and the Hamburglar wear the same outfit. They both wear the fedora and trench coats.
That's true. Well, we don't have Hamburglar is more of a cape situation.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's a black cape with hamburgers inlaid on the inside. Mm-hmm. And giant red
fashion icon.
Shoes. Yeah, wear the black and white burglar stripes. The only thing about Hamburglar is
dress for the job you want.
Yeah, it was incredible. Like it was like the most comfortable. Like obviously, I was hanging out. Well, I was never hanging out with Ronald. I was the pre-show for Ronald. Ronald's like a whole thing. But I would hang out with Grimace, and they have no mobility. Meanwhile, I'm dressed like a human person with just a giant head. It was awesome. I was like, boop, 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 boop. It was so fun.
The Hamburglar and the Cookie Monster are two people who've really taken their passions and made them into careers.
Oh, yeah.
One's a career of crime, but both, I mean, a crime of passion, if you will.
Yeah. I mean, it's hamburgers. How can you not just want to steal hamburgers?
All right, I cut you off from my Carmen Sandiego
no,
epiphany. you started an improv group at Cincinnati Christian,
I did.
right? What was
Yeah.
it called? Was it?
It
Did it have a name?
It didn't have a name because, well, okay. So there was a subset of a name for my friend who was from New Zealand and we were Kiwi and guinea pigs. And so we had that. Oh yeah, there's my stupid human trick. I can sound like a guinea pig. So earlier you asked, am I afraid of living animals? And no, because when my parents got divorced, we had 32 guinea pigs and 4 rabbits and a whole bunch of fish and a dog and a bird. So like I just grew up with animals. Currently, as an adult human with a child and a half is my nephew lives with us half the week. Is we only have 2 dogs. We're done. We're
a full child, but
yeah,
only there half the time.
Yeah, he's a full child. Nothing is like baking. That's not what I mean by half a child. Like he's a full child.
Okay.
Do you want me to sound like a guinea pig for you?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
Is that where that was leading up
like,
to?
Well, I mean, I don't have to, but I said kiwi and guinea pigs and I thought about it. Okay, ready? Yep, that's what you get at Meanwhile at the Museum, Cincinnati Museum Center. That's exactly where I thought this was going to go today.
Dog owners, we apologize if they made it through the whole episode and then lost their minds.
Yeah, my girls would be like, what?
At the guinea pig.
Yeah. You don't even know where to go from here.
I didn't know that's the sound guinea pigs made.
Mitch was nodding. He knows. It's real.
Mitch, are you allergic to guinea pigs? Nod your head.
Oh,
very
well.
well.
I no longer have them, so it's good. You know, it's like, yeah, I won't bring in any guinea pigs for you.
Are you? But you're not allergic to guinea pig energy that Gwen's bringing. Okay. Shaking his head, so we're okay.
You bring a lot of energy.
All right. You warned that we were going to go over time,
Told
and
ya.
the trick is we don't really set a limit, so it doesn't matter. But I am going to ask you 2 questions.
Oh yeah, okay.
2 more questions. One, do you have a secret tip for people visiting the museum?
Mm-hmm.
Like either something not to miss, or this is the way you do it, this is the way you experience it. You
My
already
whole job.
you already dropped Museums for All, so I think that's a wonderful tip for people, and the fact that you can check out museum memberships, museum passes from the library. So I think those are 2 really big ones. But once they're in the doors, once they're in the building, what's your advice to them?
Well, I'm actually going to take you back out of the doors. I'm going to say before you get here, my number 1 tip is for any of this stuff that we just talked about, or even other things that you're not sure of, on the Museum Center's webpage, we have an accessibility page. And I try to keep that as updated as I can. When people ask new questions, they're there. So there's like subheadings under mobility or resources for blind, visually impaired. But then I just updated stuff on Pompeii, talking about the Omnimax. Like each Omnimax has slightly different stuff. So we try to keep that updated as much as we can. But what I'm really excited about is within the last 6 to 8 months, we now have sensory maps on there. So if somebody needs an accessibility map, just kind of overlay, like where do you have universal restrooms or where do you have, we have that. But then if you need to go deeper, like if you are sensory avoidant yourself or somebody who's a sensory seeker in your family, then you can see like, oh, this is where things are louder. This is where things are softer. Here's where different lighting techniques are. And so we have all of that on maps. And then we also have gallery guides right underneath it that literally show you pictures. It's not like because again, it's empowerment. So how much information can I front load you with? And you can then make the choice. So it'll show you the galleries that have Braille. There's like pictures of that. The galleries where they have tactile things and you can touch. And so for every single gallery, there is a PowerPoint slide page that kind of give you a list or a rundown. Like some things from the historic nature of our building are complicated. There's nothing at this point that I can do about the gradient of the ramps in the 2 main museums. And that can be very difficult, especially for people who are wheelchair users or have strollers, those kind of things. And so there's, in there showing you where they are and where maybe there's a workaround or an elevator. So definitely check out that website. And if you have additional questions, you can always email me at accessibility@cincymuseum.org. And then once you get inside, we got everything for you. This is just a place. And my favorite place in the whole museum is Newsreel Theater. It's my very favorite. But there's not don't miss there's not a lot going on there. But I just think it's a room that feels like a hug. Like you just walk in and it's just like, oh, this is amazing. But the rest of the museum, we're ready for you. We're excited to have you here, and we can't wait to hear about your day while you're here, and then you're going to go and tell everyone else, and then they're going to come. It's going to be incredible.
That's the strongest endorsement I've heard for the newsreel theater. I've never heard it described that way.
Yeah.
It feels like a hug.
It does. It just, obviously there's the historical component where you walk in and you really are like, oh, I'm in 1935 right now. Okay. But beyond that, I think just the ambiance of it, and it's a little smaller and it has this carpeted feel. It just, you walk in and you're like, good's going to happen in here today. You just feel it's going to be a hug.
But just to add to that, we do rotate some OG newsreels.
That's true.
Through there, so you can live for at least a few minutes in the 1930s.
In the 1930s and 40s. Yeah, that's true. And, I would be remiss not to talk about our incredible volunteers that we have all throughout the building who are going to, again, help you in your time here, whether you see the volunteers or behind the scenes. Like, we have volunteers who work in HR. We have volunteers who work in philanthropy. We have incredible volunteers who work on the floor. And then we have this subset of, like, special agent volunteers who are the Heritage Program docents. And they will give you free tours on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And the hug, known as Newsreel Theater, is on that tour. And sometimes we even have them interpreted tours, which is really fun because we work with interpreter training program at Cincinnati State, and they will interpret those tours sometimes.
Which is really awesome.
It's really cool.
That's really cool. Last question I have for you. If you could trade roles with anyone for a day, who would it be?
I've been thinking about this question way too hard.
Have you?
I have. I've been thinking about it for weeks. So my go-to answer always is I want to grow up and be Whitney Owens. Like, I love what Whitney gets to do here and all the awesome stuff here. But then I thought that's kind of a cop-out because she's already in my upline, right? So then I was thinking, and I think the person who has the most different job, but I would also love, is Catherine Gold. I think to go over and to work in historic collections, like you alluded earlier, during restoration, we lived in Geyer, and David used to bring out stuff and just show us stuff. And I just feel like working in the history collection would be like, what's behind door number 1, like constantly. And there, again, like so many stories to be told and found in her incredible collection over there that's where I would geek out.
And not to just keep poking you.
Keep poking. I don't care.
Some of what's in the history collection. So Catherine Gould is our curator of history objects and fine art, surprisingly.
And fine art, yeah.
Some of that stuff are like Civil War uniforms, for example, that's on a mannequin. Where does that fall?
Mannequins are fine.
Okay.
I mean,
it's almost
were they previously alive?
Well, it's
that's
not quite
a weird
human taxidermy,
okay,
but
so again, like growing up in small churches, the daughter of a preacher, like our first couple churches when I was really little, all of my friends were like 80, and so they would unfortunately pass away, and so it was very sad, and but somehow that animal piece never made the connection. It was just like, okay, I get it. People go, believing on their faith belief, they go to heaven or they don't, like whatever. But like, where does the animal go? What is happening with the animal? And why are we then putting it on our walls? It goes back to the decoration piece.
Last question. Oh my gosh.
I mean, if it's like a buffalo quilt, that's fine. It has a purpose. I don't want it on my bed, but it's okay.
We've had mummy exhibits in here.
Oh yeah, that's fine.
That's fine too?
Yeah, that's
all
fine.
Right.
That was actually really cool. See, I know. I've been told more than once that I'm a walking paradox, and I get it. It's actually, it turns out, ADHD. Who knew? But yeah, I mean, there's just, again, it's I don't know. If I saw a mummy in someone's house, creeped out. If I see a mummy in the museum, scientific knowledge.
Probably understandable.
Yeah, right. I think maybe there's a through theme.
Well, Gwen, thank you for joining us. I really had a lot of fun. I appreciate it.
Good.
Thank you all for listening to Meanwhile at the Museum. Remember, if you liked what you heard, please rate and subscribe. But more importantly, come see for yourself. Visit cincymuseum.org to see the latest reasons to visit. If you have any questions, comments, or just want to tell us how much you love the show, send us an email at meanwhile@cincymuseum.org. Thanks for listening.